Please like, share, subscribe, and don't forget to ring that notification bell. Thanks so much for watching. Today is June 26th, and it was supposed to be a court date for BRYAN KOHBERGER's preliminary hearing. However, because of the indictment, there is no longer a preliminary hearing. A lot of well-known people have been getting that wrong lately on social media and YouTube. Let's talk about something really, really interesting. Coburgers Defense filed a bunch of paperwork, and an objection the other day was released. And in that, it states something really troubling. It says, no matter what came first, the car or genetic genealogy, the investigation has provided precious little. She states there is no connection between Mr. Kohberger and the victims. There is no explanation for the total lack of DNA evidence from the victims in Mr. Kohberger's apartment, office, home, or vehicle. In essence, through the lack of disclosure and that motion to protect the genetic genealogy investigation, the state is hiding its entire case. Wow. That's a pretty bold statement right there in black and white to put on paper. So, what is the truth in this case? We have news media outlets reporting all these unnamed sources close to the investigation, stating all these connections, but right here you can see that is likely not true. The attorney isn't going to write something so blatant if, in fact, the prosecution submitted these alleged connections between Kohberger and these victims. I don't even know what to say at this point. And the weak things that they've sensationalized, such as, a social media message, if in fact that's even true, which I'm doubting, but hypothetically, if that were true, that wouldn't be so out of the norm to say hello to somebody when they all are in this college community in these little areas where all these kids are located. Another really, really troubling statement released it says, by December 17th, 2022, lab analysts were aware of 2 additional males' DNA within the house where the deceased were located. Another unknown male DNA on a glove found outside the residence November 20th, 2022. We all remember that glove found outside of the residence right there in Idaho, found by Chris McDonough of the Interview Room. You can check out some of my earlier videos and you will find stories on that, as well as you can go to the Interview Room and see Chris's video that he created when it was found. This puts my mind all over the place because if they don't have a profile for this glove, one of the theories was it was one of the crime scene technicians that left the glove there. But they would have their DNA on file because they need it, to rule it out getting cross-contaminated in evidence. So if it's not them, whose glove was it? And we know it's not BRYAN KOHBERGER's glove that everyone kept saying it was, because they have his DNA and they would have matched it. It also states further, these 3 separate and distinct male DNA profiles were not identified through CODIS, leading to the conclusion that the profiles do not belong to Mr. Kohberger. This goes back to some of my earlier questions regarding people involved in this case, particularly one person who involved themselves in the case. Their DNA is in CODIS, to my knowledge, based on paperwork I've seen that's been released as public information due to that individual having a record. However, I don't know if that process was ever done. So, another fun fact, that individual seen there with a neighbor who inserted himself into the case by alleging he heard a scream at 4 a.m. when 4 a.m. wasn't even on the radar at that time. We didn't know about 4 a.m. until the PCA came out. That individual with him that appears female is actually a male. I did a lot of digging when a lot of odd coincidences and statements were made, and I'm going to link an earlier video in the description. I've also reached out to this famous neighbor who lives across the street to maybe clarify some of why he never outwardly mentioned he was at the grub bus, where you can actually watch the video and see Maddie is standing right there and doesn't acknowledge him in the least. So if they were acquainted neighbors, not even a hello, nothing. I found that really odd, and I always wanted to know who was the person with this infamous neighbor that night. And I did the digging, and I found out that this is actually a male. This person, also seen at the grub bus, is known as Jorge Barbosa, also known as Juno Paloma Vivaldi. Now, a big disclaimer. This person is not charged of any wrongdoing, hasn't been outwardly suspected, and this is just a conversation of fact that this person was in fact in the video with the victim's neighbor, Enon Harsh. That is a fact. Also, this person's gender and identities are not a secret. They've put that out there publicly. So, I was just thinking in my mind, what if, here's just a what if scenario. What if hypothetically these two people go into somewhere and, they've been spotted and somebody says a man and a woman went into a convenience store or whatever and some crime occurred. And they do DNA, and it comes back 2 male sets of DNA only. And the investigators say, well, this isn't correct. It can't be because we know that it was a man and a woman. Just something to ponder in your mind. Can that happen? Can things like that get missed because all things on the surface aren't always what they appear and what's really going on the inside? And I don't say this in any way to be insensitive to people who identify with different genders and things like that, because I have nothing against any of that. That is up to an individual, and each individual needs to be their own. And I am in no way insinuating that that person was involved, but we have a big unknown. So you do over 40-minute interview with Lauren Matthias over at Hidden True Crimes, and this was never mentioned. He also recently did a video, I want to say like 2, maybe 3 months ago, with someone else with the Chef Dizzy name, and everybody glorified him as being this cool hippie neighbor. But he may be, but I find a lot of things problematic with his behavior personally. I'm not a police officer, but I think that the public is owed the police acknowledging some of those oddities as being looked at. They discounted many other things, but they never even made mention of these, and these are a lot closer to home. If I was a defense attorney, I would definitely be all over that. There are many articles talking about how the FBI went into public genealogy sites and worked to build a family tree of genetic relatives to get to BRYAN KOHBERGER. However, under this gag order, they can't view that, how that happened. So Ann Taylor is arguing this quite ferociously and has brought up some really interesting points. We also can't ignore how adamant they were about that 2011 to 2013 Hyundai Elantra. with an unknown plate. That was really something else, because it'd been asked many times, how do you know it's that year? And they were adamant. The chief was so adamant. And he did not drive that year vehicle. That's a very, very common make and model of a car. So even though his DNA is on that knife sheath, if that's truly all they have, and you can see the differences in the years, that's a 15. This is a 13. You can see the undercarriage in the back there where the lights are. And that's a 15 where it's black underneath. It's a different, there are differences. That grainy camera footage, we can't tell what kind of car that is as an absolute, if that was even the car. But the front grille, and if you go back in my other videos, doesn't match. However, there was recently talk of a Nissan Sentra, which is there on the left, being involved in the crime initially. I don't have that source right now, but that also recently came out. And there is a 2012 Nissan Altima. I used a 2012. I don't know the exact year of the car that Enon drove, but he did drive a Nissan Altima, and the instrument cluster is the same from 2007 all the way until 2013. And the body style really did not change much at all. I think in my video where I talk about it, I mentioned it as a 2007. However, I didn't actually know for sure 2007, but that's when that instrument cluster started. A lot of bombshells and a lot of unknowns. Please, I do read all of my comments. Let me know what you think. I've linked that video in the description so that you can see the questions that I pose and why I feel that information needs some explanation. And hopefully all these questions get answered at some point, either via Mr. Harsh himself, his friend, Juno, and I guess we won't be hearing from anybody involved in the case since they're all under gag order. But these are very valid questions that I think the public really would like an answer to, if what's happening in these motions and objections are real, that they have nothing else. Granted, this is just a piece of the case, a very small piece, and the discovery clock is ticking. So hopefully we'll get more information in the coming weeks to see where we stand with Mr. Kohberger. Until then, please stay tuned, and I will be covering the facts involved in this case. I try to stay away from a lot of the rumored speculation. So if you would, please subscribe and like my channel. It helps a lot. The information I've provided hasn't been reported by anyone else regarding these two questionable individuals, and so I really wanted to get it out there. I've held on to it for at least 6 months, and you know, I don't like to interject innocent people into things, but it's weighing on me, and the question still looms. And with this new document dump, it just highlighted those questions even more. Stay tuned, be safe, and thanks for watching.